Hello, everybody. Welcome to BharatShakti.in. I am Brigadier Chatterjee, editor BharatShakti.in. Today, we will talk about how the artillery won the Kargil war. A word about artillery before we go ahead. The greatest exponents of artillery in the West were perhaps Napoleon and Frederick the Great. In our continent, too, we've had two great kings who exploited the artillery for very many victories. One was Tipu Sultan and the other was Maharaja Ranjit Singh. Artillery has played a decisive role in shaping the history of our subcontinent. The first Battle of Panipat is evidence of that. However, the first recorded use of artillery was in 1368 in the war between Bahmani King Muhammad Shah and Raja of Vijayanagar. Firishta explicitly records the use of guns in that battle. Let's go fast forward now. Let's go to Kargil operations in 99. Our guest today is none other than the commander who was nicknamed Rampaging Bull of Dras, Major Lakhvinder Singh. Sir, welcome to the district, sir.
Thank you.
Very kind of you have to found the time for us, sir. We'll go ahead, sir, and launch into this. I want to make a statement to start with, sir, and I would like your comments on that. And this is primarily about artillery's role, sir. Uh, I feel that firepower and maneuvers are the two primary elements in the battlefield, the two decisive elements in the battlefield. As the going gets tougher, like in the mountains, like in this case, Kargil, super high altitudes, the progress of the maneuver element is uh, totally dependent on the firepower available. And in this case, it is primarily the infantry. Now, artillery is the basic deliverer of firepower in the battlefield. It has to destroy or degrade the objective to the point that the infantry can struggle its way up for the final assault. Please relate this to Kargil operations, and can we have your comments on that, sir?
Thank you, Church. I'll just talk about this, but before that, I want to start with the topography because that is a great role in what happened there. The Kargil area, part of Ladakh region, lies in the shadow of the Great Himalayan ranges. It gets merely 2 inches of rain annually. The landscape is desolate, devoid of any vegetation. The mountains range in height from 11,000 to 18,000 feet. The rarefied air, low temperatures, low atmospheric pressure makes the climb uphill arduous task and tests the limit of human endurance. The town of Daras is known to have a temperature of minus 60 degrees in winters, which is the second coldest place in the world. For military, this is Kargil makes one of the toughest battlefields. The defender has an overriding advantage over the attacker. Sitting on top of the hill, he can take pot shots on the assaulting infantry. On the 1st June 1999, when 8th Mountain Division was inducted into Daras sector, it had much responsibility to fulfill. Looking at the impassable slopes, task looked ominous. The maneuver element in this gambit was infantry. The biggest concern of the gunners was to reach infantry to the periphery of the objective. It was an absolute essential. So we thought about, reflected back in history and recalled the use of cannons during the time of Maharaja Ranjit Singh and Babur in the face of enemy. We stuck an idea and we needed to be experimented. We went on to then experiment this. For experiment, we chose Torolin Heights. 18 Grenadiers on the 22nd of May 20, before the division came in, had tried to tackle the Torling Heights, but they could not succeed. They dug in and stayed put on Torling Height, ranging from 50 to 800 meters from top. We chose the infamous Barbad bunker as a target on Torling Height because Barbad bunker had caused much damage to 18 Grenadiers. 2 Bofor guns of 108 Medium Regiment and 2 field guns from 197 Field Regiment were moved on the afternoon of 6 June and deployed 4 kilometers south of Toroling at Bimbat. Brigadier Amar All, commander of 56th Infantry Brigade, had joined us to witness the experiment. Once the guns were deployed, 18 Grenadiers were asked to relocate troops to the flanks of line of fire to avoid collateral damage. The guns had been prepared for direct shooting. The best detachments were chosen and rehearsed before embarking on this venture. With prayers on our lips, we opened the first shot of 155mm Bofors. The accuracy of the follow shot was a big relief. After a small correction to adjust the impact, the subsequent rounds hit Thorling squarely on the dot. It was encouraging. Before we could shift to 105mm guns, the field guns, the enemy artillery started firing on us. A word about 150mm Bofors guns. The Bofors gun fires a 40 kilogram plus of shell at a speed of 27,000 feet per second. In the direct firing mode, the layer of the gun sees the target and aims at it. Now, Naik of Tarsing of 108 Medium Regiment was a layer of the Bofors gun, was an exceptional gunner with hands as steady as of a surgeon. He could possibly put round after round at the intended place. By the time we had fired a few rounds, our troops around the target could hear the enemy in complete disarray. The radio intercepts proved how devastating was the impact of the enemy on the enemy. हमारे पर कहर बरस रहा है, हमें बचाओ. The hell has broken loose on us. Please save us. The experiment of direct firing gave better than expected results. A suggestion was made to CO 18 Grenadiers were sitting on top to take advantage of the favorable situation and go for the feature. He thought otherwise. In retrospect, 18 Grenadiers missed the great opportunity to ascribe the first victory in Kargil to their name. The next step was to ensure the indirect firing guns were so positioned that most of the shells fell on the target and no area on the target was left uncovered. We used most of the guns to fire at low angle. An optimum mix of DF guns with indirect firing guns were to produce the best results. DF guns allowed us to reach the infantry on the periphery of enemy defenses. The broad concept of firepower was taking shape in our mind, which are yet to be tested. So we went to test this on the 12th of June at Toroling. 18 Grenadiers posed a peculiar situation. They were sitting close to the target, and while we had the DF guns firing at them, which were accurate, we had to register the indirect firing guns also on the target. Now, with them sitting 50 meters away from the target, it was impossible to do that. They were asked to come down 600 meters, the minimum distance required is the buffer distance to register targets. Infantry was not willing. They were hesitant, and rightfully so. To lose distance, to lose height in altitude area is a sacrilege. However, the commander of the brigade all was very convinced that what artillery was doing, they could save the day for us. I assured them that you come down and I will make sure the enemy does not come and occupy these areas. They accepted that. The commander accepted it, and that's how they came down. The registration process started. We had made two teams for registering these targets under Colonel Medirata. They started at 16:30 hours. Within 2 hours, the targets were registered. At 19:30 hours, all guns opened up on Toroling. The fire was witnessed by top brass of 8th Mountain Division. Colonel David, Deputy Commander, 26th Infantry Brigade. His first reaction was that I have never seen such accurate and devastating firing by the guns, even in the school of artillery. It is said that Toroling was shorter by a few inches the next morning. The success of Toroling ratified a concept which proved to be a turning point in Kargil war. This became a game changer. The army and the country heaved a sigh of relief on a victory.
Thank you, sir. That's, I think, a very nice way to get us started on the issue. The second issue that I have for you, sir, is you've been called a bull of Dras for the way you use artillery in most innovative manner, I would say, enabling the infantry to reach within 50, 100 meters of the objective. Now, that's, mind you, that's not exactly the kind of safety distances that is advised, that is the instructions that we have. What was the concept you used to achieve this?
The concept in many facets. The main ingredient was to use 100 guns or more on each objective, a mix of direct firing guns and indirect firing guns to produce an impact equivalent to a mini nuclear implosion to pulverize the enemy. In short, use a sledgehammer to break a peanut. Over time, the Pakistanis became scared of artillery fire and frequently told the headquarters, "हमें बचाओ, यहाँ कहर बरस रहा है." Neutralizing enemy artillery was part and parcel of this concept because in every attack operation, one of the major fears of the enemy artillery trying breaking up the assaulting troops. So to ensure that no disruption was caused to attacking infantry troops, we were able to neutralize and make arrangements to make sure the enemy artillery was totally neutralized. The safety distance you just said was 50 to 100 is not the norm. The safety distance in mountains is minimum 300 to 500 meters. And this is the most difficult space to cover. The enemy, the infantry has marched up the hills. They are now in the range of small arms fire. They are closer to the defender, and therefore the most difficult part of any attacker is to cover this distance. To overcome this, we had placed DF guns in such a manner that they could continue firing on the enemy and keep their heads down till the time the FOO or the infantry officer there wanted us to stop. Now, this gave them a great confidence and they could move as close as 50 to 100 meters. The task tables that we made was simple. They were timed on call because in mountains it is not possible to give you exact timing of the progress of battle. In addition to DF a day, we had also imagined maybe we'll need this sort of engagement even at night. So we evolved a procedure to engage targets by DF at night. It was called the DIDF, direct indirect firing. This was a modified version of DF. The FOs or the infantry on the spot directed the fire when required. It was to prove very useful to burst bunkers at night and expedite the infantry attacks. Now, having ratified this concept, the first objective for us was 0.5140. 0.5140 extension of Turoling. It was the highest point in Daras. It dominated the complete road and the Daras area. It was captured by 13 Jack Rifle and 18 Gadwal battalion from two directions. Preceded by the mini implosion of 100 guns on 0.5140 on 19 June, 13 Jack Rifle walked up to 0.5140 unopposed. The Pakistan had abandoned the post under the artillery fire.
So we'll go a little ahead, and I will have to go a little faster also. I've got too many questions for you. I don't want to miss out on any one of them. When you came over there, obviously we were surprised, and we didn't have the kind of quantum of artillery that you possibly wanted. What was it you did to build it up, and how was the build up done?
So when we came there were only 5 to 6 fire units, and they were under the command of Colonel Alok Deb. He had a dog FDC. There was no communication, so the artillery was totally inadequate, and he tried his best to do what he had to do. Now, having commanded 1 artillery brigade before coming to 8 artillery brigade, I had commanded 4 Bofors regiments, and I knew their characteristics. I knew their plus points. During interaction with the corps commander, he had asked me what could we do to see that we have good results under this situation. So I told him, sir, you induct more Bofors there, because in mountains, heavy shell made all the difference, a lighter shell made lesser difference. In this also, I met the Chief of Staff, 15th Corps, Major General Sehota, and he asked me, he said, what are you doing? What is the artillery doing there? So I told him, I said, sir, give me 4 Bofors regiments and send me there, and I will change the situation. He looked at me in askance. These comments reached the corps commander, and corps commander was one officer. I think you understand artillery the best. You're very uh, uh, open to giving more artillery, and that is how the started artillery are getting built up. And by the time we started the first attack, by 12 June, we had 25 units and a troop of multi-barrel rocket launchers.
So my next question is about, they have to climb the steep slopes over there, and it's very difficult for an infantryman to really go up the steep slopes unless you can keep the enemy's head down. Now, what was it that you did at various places of attacks? If you could just explain with one or two examples.
You see, the success of the evolved concept had emboldened us, and it worked to a T for every operation. I will let me give an example. Tiger Hill. The Tiger Hill was one of the most dominating feature in the Dara sector. Standing majestically, it overlooked the Moscow Valley and Daras and span of 17 kilometers of national highway starting from Mogulpura to Dangchok. The Battle of Tiger Hill was hyped up the media. There was more important feature, but media had hyped it up as a cornerstone of victory, both by the defender and attacker. The defender thought that if they could hold this, they would win the battle. The fulcrum will be in their favor, and the attacker thought they could dislodge the enemy from here, then they would have achieved a great victory. Before the attack, Brigadier Bajwa, who was Commander 192 Brigade, Infantry Brigade, he came and he requested me for maximum help to get his success on Tiger. He was a newly inducted officer and it was his first operation. Apparently, he had heard the pivotal role played by artillery in the early operation. I assured him that, God willing, we will sail through with laurels. So, attack on Tiger Hill commenced on the evening of 3rd July by 18 grenadiers and a company of 8 Sikh. It was a tough climb. Tiger Hill was pulverized with artillery fire of 100 guns and 6 guns in DF roll. As the war progressed, we put more and more guns in DF roll because they were giving us good results. The mini
DF is
implosion,
direct firing.
sorry,
DF is direct firing
roll.
to
DF is direct
viewers.
firing roll. Yes. So the mini implosions had downgraded the morale of the enemy. His sungers and temporary shelters collapsed under the weight of medium guns. Post midnight, there was a peculiar situation. The weather turned foul. The GOC informed me that the battalion had lost the direction and were in a state of disorientation. How could we help them? I said, sir, impossible this time. We can't see the target. We don't know where the troops are because they're coming from different directions. So therefore, safety was a major factor, and we could not afford to at this stage fire at our own troops. He said, do something. So I went to the gun area and I caught with the best layer again, Lance of Tar Singh, and told him to let's try the DIDF. Now he was good. We applied the old data on the gun. We had fired it earlier in the daytime. And once again, with prayers on our lips, we fired the shot. It was surprising how close was the shot next to Tiger Hill. And we repeated the shots till the time the 18 grenadiers found the bearing. And that's how they were guided on to Tiger Hill. On the morning of 4th July, it's amazing. The GOC, while leaving the operation room of 56th Mounted Brigade from where we're controlling the battle, he said, artillery has done it again. The infantry reached the Tiger Hill top, slung arms. What a great achievement for gunners. Immediately following the attack was an attack on point 4875, the most dominating ground in the area. It dominated a span of 25 kilometers of the road from Matyan to Dengchuk. And it was also the last vestige of Pakistan defense. 79th Mountain Brigade was tasked to capture this in 2 phases, involving 13 Jack and 17 Jack, 17 Jat, and 1 Naga. Why am I telling you this position together? Because they were one after another. After Tiger Hill was captured, tackled, the next day the attack on 4875 started. The attack started with a bang, and by morning of 5th July, most of the phase 1 was completed. We had employed 100 guns to pulverize and 12 guns in a direct firing role, 4 on the eastern face and 12 on the western face. It was a new beginning for the gunners. After the capture of phase 2 objective on 6th July, enemy launched a counterattack on twin bumps and pimples, and suddenly the enemy lost the momentum and started pulling back. They had been beaten, and we had won the war. The 4875 was named Gun Hill to honor the battle winning contribution of artillery. So that was a great achievement for us.
Right. Let me go ahead a little more, sir. One has heard of even daylight attacks being launched by the infantry during the Kargil operation. It's something almost impossible. Uh, Mountain warfare at those altitudes, something almost impossible. How did you provide the artillery support to give them the guts for doing a thing like
So
that?
first of all, let's talk artillery support. I do disagree with the conductor. It's we never talk about artillery support. We after Kargil realized it's not artillery support, it's artillery firepower, because
Point seems
it is the firepower that made all the difference in attacks. Not only here, after we finished Kargil war, even the Americans tried the same concept, and they realized that it is not the air power, but the firepower made the difference in the altitude and the hills. In any case, coming to a question about the daylight, you're right. The daylight attacks are almost impossible in the open terrain, where you can possibly beat the attacking enemy with a catapult. It is so clear, there's no cover, there's no foliage. You're in the open, and your movement is so slow that you can take aim and take pot shots and get people. But by now, the confidence of in the guns had increased a lot. We had also taken deliberate steps during preparatory stage to show many of the junior commanders and infantry men the the effect of direct firing. You see, when we fired multi-barrel rocket launchers, and you could see the trail, which gave a great feeling, a good feeling. And then also the Boffer shell, which has also firing tail, and you can see the shell going there. So this had given a great confidence. So coming to your point of data attack, so when 13 Jack was supposed to attack the point 5.5140 on the 19th of June, before going there, they had to go on the saddle, and there was an intervening feature called the Rocky Knob, which had to be cleared before they could attack point 5140. Now, interesting thing happened here. This was to be taken by 13 Jack. The CO 13 Jack was not with them. The 2S had fallen sick. The 13 Jack was being led by one Major Joshi. I heard that he was approved to be a lieutenant colonel. So I told the GOC, I said, sir, he was approved to be a lieutenant colonel. Why don't you give us the rank on the spot? And I think he did speak to corps commander and was made a lieutenant colonel on the spot. He never looked back thereafter. So then on seeing this Rocky Knob interfering in their preparation, they decided to launch a day attack. There was no place to put DF guns. So DF guns were put in the location of brigade headquarters per se, two guns, and we shot the bunkers. And then these people went for daylight attack, and the enemy ran away from there, leaving aside the ammunition and guns. So the first daylight attack was succeeded. The second one game also was on area point 4700. Now, after clearing the 5140, we are moving westwards to clean up the area. Point 4700 was important feature, which also dominated the road. 18 Garhwal was supposed to capture this. The capture area to capture area Rocky and Sangar in point 4700 on the saddle. This ridge left to a junction point. It was difficult going. The DF guns had destroyed one bunker holding the advance. The Sioux, under the cover of Bofors, decided to launch a daylight attack at 5 o'clock in the evening on Rocky and Sangar and cleared the position. The enemy, in confusion, fled, leaving behind large quantities of arms and ammunition. So the two clear, there were more examples, but this is how we. Actually, what made a difference was the direct firing guns more than anything else.
I guess so. I guess so. Sir, there are incidents when the forward observation officers of the artillery took over the company because of some situations when the company commander was injured or, well, he martyred, whatever be the situation. Can you recall one or two such incidents?
Well, there were two incidents I can recall very clearly. First one, Tololing. When Tololing was being tackled on the 12th of June, a Charlie company headed by Major Vivek Gupta was to go on Tololing feature. He became a casualty, close to the target objective. Uh, Captain MK Singh was the OP officer. He showed his presence of mind, took caught, took charge of the company and led the company to capture the objective, and then also beat back counterattack. He wore two hats of the company commander and FO. For this action, he was awarded the Sena Medal, which he deserved for doing a great job. The next action was and the day attack. The next attack where the FO took over the company was when you're tackling point 4875, the gun hill. There was a feature called ledge. The ledge was becoming almost impossible to capture. It was giving very big trouble to us. And 17 Jat was supposed to capture that. The Charlie company of 17 Jat Gate tried to capture it. The company commander became a casualty. It was taken over by the company 2IC, Captain Anuj Nair, who was martyred. Seeing the condition and delicate situation, Captain Gil Dayal took over the command of the company, captured the ledge, beat back the counterattack, and held on to ledge. For this action, he was awarded a VRC for courage and initiative.
I want to go deviate a little bit from this routine things, but the issue is that because the artillery fire could keep the enemy's head down or cause casualties amongst them, possibly we did not have as many casualties as we would have had otherwise. I mean, the infantry. Your comments.
The firepower had in Kargil salutary effect on cutting down the casualties. The ratio of casualty in normal attack in the plains is 1:3. For one defender, the three attackers lose their lives. Surprisingly, in this case, Pakistan is in altitude area in a mountainous terrain. It is taken as 1:6 or 1:7. The Pakistanis had 740 people, 50 people dead. So by that calculation, we should have something like 5,000 people or 4,500 people being killed before we could capture these heights. Surprisingly, the new concept effectively applied ensured that we suffered lesser casualties as compared to Pakistanis and the defender. And therefore, we reversed the whole idea of this idea that the attacker suffers more casualty. As per official release, the total fatal casualties in Kargil were Indian 436 and Pakistani 737, almost half of it. I think this should become a normal practice that we assault by fire and only use infantry to mop up and hold on to and reorganize and hold the ground.
Right. Anything that you have to say about your air observation post sets, the helicopter flying observation post officers?
In Kargil, in the post in Daras and Kargil, the enemy was carrying Stinger missiles. Now, Stinger SAMs, shoulder-fired missiles, are very effective. Earlier in the day, they had downed one aircraft. One aircraft was lost in accident. So the AROP were a little cautious, but performing the communication duties, logistics, and CAS evacuation and ferrying senior officers, their performance praiseworthy and very good. However, in direction of fire on the enemy, they were guarded and rather cautious. And because Stinger missiles are a great deterrent. So I think the country will need to look for platforms which can avoid or which can parry the missiles or have armor plating so that the flying platform is not a sitting duck.
Right. My last question, in fact, what about gallantry awards? You're quite happy with the kind of gallantry awards the gunners won?
Well, almost every individual took part in Kargil operation, fought fearlessly. Each one of them was a hero. While some were lucky to get awards, there were many unsung heroes. Sadly, I repeat, sadly, the share of artillery were not in proportion to their contribution. I do hope the armed forces sitting in the headquarters would sometimes analyze this and evolve a more pragmatic system of awards. To quote, infantry got 99 awards, Air Force got 36 awards, artillery, the most biggest contributor to the victory in Kargil, got 13 awards. This was, I had taken up the case with the people concerned. I think it was too late. And this needs to be if a future watershed right before it demoralize the organization which deliver the best. So in the Kargil war proved that artillery was no more a fire support arm but a firepower arm to shape and win the battle with lower casualties and faster success. It has been acknowledged world over that Kargil was won by artillery. Without artillery fire, infantry stood no chance of taking the heights as they were vulnerable to Pakistan forces firing freely down upon the slope while they made slow and difficult trek up the slope. And to sum it up, I would say use of firepower, like war, is not only science, it is also an art. The artillery played the war symphony in perfect harmony, coloring the enemy in crimson and adorning the Indian army in blue. While the commander held the baton, the finest tunes were played by the ensemble comprising of the gunner fraternity, which by itself is a great ode to gunners.
Well, thank you, sir. Thank you so much for having given us the time. And thank you, Vias. This was part of our series of episodes that we've been running to celebrate the Vijay Divas when our boys made so much of sacrifice on the Kargil mountains. Please do log in time and again, and you'll find such interesting discussions for you. The last word that I would like to recall, General, about artillery is what Joseph Stalin had said that artillery is the god of war. They say infantry is the queen of the battlefield, Ahmad Kaur is the king of the battlefield, artillery is the god of war. Thank you so much for having spared your time, sir.
Thank you very much, and it was a pleasure talking to you.